Yo, what is going on, my fellow weebs? Krono here, and welcome back to the channel. So with the most recent update, we got new Ex Augment, and honestly, they're a whole lot of fun. Today, we're going to talk about exactly how these Ex Augments work, how they compare to the ones we have currently, and the combinations that I would recommend going ahead and looking for or utilizing, depending upon your specific play types. But for jumping out new here, as always, my name is Krono. I primarily cover PSO2 content. Would much appreciate to subscribe as we get towards that 10K mark, hopefully by the end of this year. And if you guys manage to do that, I'm gonna have to come up with something pretty drastic. Either way, let's go ahead and start the video. So I have already begun to dabble in the new Ex Augments, and I've got to say, they're pretty fun. This is probably the one that I'm going to shoot for almost all the time, which is maintain, bring down, and shortage HP. It just works together very well. I do have another one. This one is got enemy down. I would honestly prefer bring down. I think bring down is actually the better choice overall. And we're going to talk about what the best in slot combinations are right now, what the general consensus is on those, and what I agree with and what I'm not the biggest fan of. So there's this resource that's going around, pretty useful, honestly. It's very helpful with the amount of damage it shows and of course how everything works. And we're going to use it to talk about the different combinations. So the new ones, of course, are the ones that are highlighted. We've got bring down, PB boost, evade gain, maintain balance, and turnover shield. So I'm sorry, turnover, not turnover shield. I heard turnover and tri shield together. My bad. So the way these individuals work. So bring down PB boost. So bring down PB boost is a base of 4.5% and gives you 2% increased potency while the enemy is downed, and then plus 6% PB gauge accumulation when an enemy is downed on a 10-second cooldown. So every 10 seconds, if something is down, you get plus 6% PB accumulation. Pretty solid base. You get more PB when something gets downed. Nothing too big there. We like to see it basically. The big thing here is the 2% potency while an enemy is downed. That's pretty nice. So when an enemy gets downed, you do 2% extra damage to them. Now, here's the interesting thing. This is plus 2% potency while enemy is downed. I'm not sure if that means 2% potency to a downed target, or you get 2% extra potency when an enemy is down nearby you, or however that happens to work. It just says 2% potency while enemy is downed. I'm assuming it's to the downed target, but if it's just in general in AoE, this is going to be kind of silly too. Assuming you can get a single target down and you can just AoE everything else around it. So it is considered a DPS type boost, and yeah, because it's honestly the strongest damage buff we currently have on all of our Ex Augments, and that's why it's one of my favorites currently at the moment. Well, it's one of my favorite thirds is what I'll call it, because there's combos and then there's like thirds basically, where you add in a third one in the mix that just gives you, it basically doesn't need anything extra to work from. Next, we have evade HP gain. So evade HP gain is 4.5%. Again, very solid. You get 1% HP on successful dodge, parry, counter on a 10-second cooldown. So every 10 seconds, if you get a successful, basically you negate damage via either a dodge, a parry, or a counter. So either your weapon action skill or a step counter, you're going to gain HP. Now, it doesn't specify whether this would work with Hunter. Hunters do nullify damage. However, it's not a dodge, it's not a parry, and it's not a counter. Well, I guess technically it could be considered a counter. So I wonder if that would work with Hunter, but that's the only class that I could consider not being able to utilize this very well. And it's also once every 10 seconds, which is pretty bad when we talk about some other stuff here. It's a 10-second cooldown and it's 1% HP, meaning that for me, that would heal 14 and I have a lot of HP. So that's not really great. I have 1421 HP. This would heal for almost nothing. Basically, it's pretty bad. So, at least again, that's my perspective of the situation. Some people do like this, and they have a way that they want to utilize it, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit here. Next, we have maintain balance. Maintain balance minus 10% HP when attacking at 50% or above HP, and then when you're at 48% or below, you're going to gain 1% HP. This is on a 0.1 second cooldown and a 0.5 second cooldown, respectively. So essentially what this does is this locks you to about 49% HP immediately. Every tick of something that you hit is going to hurt you for 10% of your HP until you hit 49%. Whenever you hit below 50%, if you're at 48, it's going to give you 1% increase. So this is supposed to balance you out exactly at 49% HP, which is what maintain balance effectively does. That's what it means. It works out perfectly. This is why I said the 1% HP when attacking is kind of lame, because it's 0.5% or 0.5 second cooldown. This is requiring you to dodge counter or something, and it's a 10-second cooldown, which seems pretty high. Honestly, this should probably be like 5 seconds, or honestly, even 1 second cooldown would be nice. This is 0.5 seconds. I know that you're thinking, oh, well, you know, you have to be at, you know, sub 50% HP or sub 48% HP for this to work. You're going to find that that's actually tankier than this. You're going to find you're going to actually be tankier than this when we talk about it in a little bit here. So turnover is the final one. And this is the one that people are considering the one of the best thirds, like kind of like that slot that I was talking about, like where I put bring down PB in. But this is the one that I'm not the biggest fan of. So plus 10% HP recovery, and after recovering HP, plus 1.5% potency for 20 seconds. Effectively what that means is normally, so the base is 4.25, which is lower than 4.5, keep that in mind. Normally this is a bit weaker. However, whenever you get this damage buff, it ends up being overall stronger than most choices, most, not all, basically on its own. It just requires you to heal. Now, what I'm hearing is kind of like the meta combination currently is maintain balance plus shortage plus turnover. What this actually does, we're going to talk about shortage here really quick. This is something I used beforehand, shortage HP, not shortage PP. The shortage HP is at less than 50% HP, you get 1.5% potency and 30% damage reduction. This is a 30% damage resistance. And if you're below 50% HP, you also get 1.5% potency. I mean, you have to be below 50% for both these things to happen, but basically at below 50% HP, you have extra damage and extra damage reduction, meaning that this 4.5 is a 6%, which is massive. And we talked about maintain balance, pushing your HP right down to 49%, which means that maintain balance is basically made for the HP Starling. So maintain balance proc shortage HP, meaning that you would be with a 30% consistent damage reduction at all times, which is pretty freaking useful. On top of that, you also would start healing immediately once you take damage. Every single hit that you do, and of course classes that don't attack as often are going to be a little bit, you know, at a disadvantage, but you heal for 1% of your HP back every single time. And there are a lot of classes that hit 50 times very quickly. So keep that in mind. You can heal very, very fast, very, very quickly overall. So these two combinations together is really nice. Now turnover, the way turnover works out, the reason why people are putting this along with it is one, it is one of the strongest choices you can have for consistency, right? Like this procs every time you heal. You have agency over it. You can actually just pop a heal and force it to proc. If you combine this to maintain balance, whenever you drop below 48%, that's also going to proc your turnover. Now, this is only up for 20 seconds. This doesn't show a cooldown. This just means that your HP has to go up once every 20 seconds. My issue with that is the better you play, the less useful this becomes. Because if you're not taking a hit at all, which most people will be, but if you're not taking a hit at all, the only way to proc this is off of your heals. And you only have 10 of those per run. And at that point, you might be looking at, oh, well, I'll save them for downs. Well, if you're saving them from downs, then you already have bring down. That's going to be better. So yes, technically turnover is the stronger choice. Turnover is going to be up more often as long as it can be proc consistently. And there are other ways of procking this too. But all those ways of procking this require you effectively to do something specific that might cost you damage. So I'm not the biggest fan of this personally. I do like maintain, shortage HP, and bring down, but that is the combination that I'm seeing that kind of definitively the strongest combination, which is maintain, shortage HP, and turnover. Now we're going to talk about some of the other combinations together that you can start using that are very powerful. Keep in mind, this is your choice. I should have probably given this disclaimer at the very beginning. Apologies, but just because I'm talking about a combination that can be good for you, it's just good having 3 EX augments in general. They are 4.5% base potency. They're 2% potency floor. Please have at least 3 EX augments. Now, you can use these to fit your playstyle. I'm going to use a couple of my chatters as examples because there's certain people that I know that like to play a very specific way. So I only recommend specific things to them. However, if you're looking at it from, I want to be the strongest I possibly can be, or I'm looking for like the meta combinations, we can also have those discussions as well, depending upon how you like to play, right? So a very common combination that existed beforehand was Lively HP Starling and Tri-Shield. Just because Lively HP Starling, as long as you were at or above 95% HP, you had damage reduction, and you had, of course, HP. I'm sorry, of course, damage. So the two of those together, you're good to go. And then, of course, Tri-Shield negates damage 3 times. When all shields are broken, the 120-second cooldown. This is kind of rough when it comes down to it. Like, some classes can't use this shield because it would negate like what they're trying to block with their shield that doesn't work alongside them. Waker is something that I'm thinking of specifically in this situation. But It's not a bad combination. Lively HP plus Tri-Shield is pretty solid. It still works out very well. And then you can throw something extra on top of that. Maybe you go with Turnover because you want to go ahead and just heal and maintain the damage buff that way. Maybe you go with Bring Down for getting the extra damage. That also works very well. You go with some of the older options as well. There's of course Risky Stance, things like that. Like there's a lot of different, I wouldn't go with Risky Stance with Lively. I just thought about that. That's a terrible idea. But there's a lot of different choices, but the Tri-Shield Lively HP Starlings is still pretty solid. It's still a very powerful choice. I mean, I maybe would consider, honestly, I would consider evade HP gain with that, just because it is an easy way for you to get back little chunks of HP back without having to really do anything, which could help keep your HP high enough. You don't have to worry about, popping a heal or anything along those lines. I do think Bring Down though would still be your best choice overall, or Turnover if you want to maintain that damage bonus that way. So up to you at the end of the day, but those are kind of what I would look at here in this situation itself. Hysterical Strength Shortage PP option still works. Hysterical Strength PP Burn, still a good combination, still very powerful. You just have a third slot now that you can utilize. Bring Down is still very good there. Endure Pain PB Boost is still really, really solid for that combination, just because you're always taking hits anyway. If you want to go very, very tanky in this situation, you can go with something like, where was it? Shortage or Patient Defense. Patient Defense is always procced basically with Hysterical Strength, Shortage PP Burn. Those are just, it's just always up because you're always burning. And if you're always burning, then you're always taking damage, which is always refreshing the damage reduction of Patient Defense. Just keep in mind, Patient Defense doesn't reduce the amount of damage you take from the burn, just everything else. And of course, when Hysterical is active, you're also taking reduced damage as well. So it just makes you very, very, very tanky overall with that combination. Now, this last set of combos is more experimental. It's more just because of the recent changes of some of the different classes that we have. Now, if you're a ranger, it's almost a no-brainer in my opinion. You pick any of the two that you like the combination of. So let's say you like Hysterical, you go Hysterical Shortage PP Burn. Let's say you're a fan of the Maintain Balance setup, which I think is extraordinarily powerful. Maintain Balance, Shortage HP Starling, really, really solid. Maybe you like that combination, that's totally fine. Just do that plus Stealth Wall. For a ranger, in most situations, you don't have enough aggro buildup with your Stealth Strike skill that you can maintain Stealth Wall pretty well. Now, if you're solo primarily, Stealth Wall doesn't really work out that well. People are like, oh, well, Stealth Wall will give you some damage reduction when you have threat. I'm not concerned. Like you have enough damage reduction from a lot of other sources where it's not really that big of a deal. So keep in mind, Stealth Wall is a pretty solid choice if you're playing specifically Ranger in this situation. I actually want to go ahead and bring this up as well. This is a conversation we had way back when these Ex Augments first were announced. But the Ex Augment combination of Shortage HP along with Maintain Balance actually ends up being insanely powerful, specifically on Waker. And the reason for that is Waker has a skill called Welfare Management that not only reduces the damage they take, it also activates a specific heal and it heals them. Now, the reason why that's important is because something like Turnover can actually be procced pretty reliably in that sort of way. Whenever you take a hit, you have a bunch of damage reduction. It's also then going to heal you, but Maintain Balance is also going to bring you back to the right HP pool. Waker effectively actually gets tankier with this combination. It's actually an increase of tank for, I believe he goes into it here. Yeah, okay, so Uber actually mentions it specifically. Ribeyes did some testing. Awesome, shout out to Ribeyes. Shortage HP Starling also has 30% damage resistance, meaning that Waker main actually gains 19% effective HP with Maintain Balance Shortage HP. Waker sub would gain about 2% effective HP compared to normal. That's massive. So if you're a Waker, Shortage HP plus Maintain Balance, actually a defensive buff for you. If you're someone who Waker subs, technically also defensive buff for you. I would say Turnover is also a really good choice in that situation, just because if you take a hit at all, you're going to take a heal immediately. You don't have to specifically utilize your heals to proc it. And you can specify those heals specifically to just proc the buff whenever you haven't taken a hit in a very long time and you need to get that extra damage buff. But it's worth mentioning that for Waker specifically, that combination is absolutely goated. And the last combination I want to talk about, this one is specifically, I would say it's build dependent and it might be a bit controversial. So Maintain Balance, Shortage HP, pretty solid combination. You can use that. Honestly, I'll take a step back. You can use any two that you want to use along with Dazzle Camo. And this is specifically for Force main class. And the reason I say this for Force main class is Force has gotten a pretty massive buff. Forces are absolutely crushing things nowadays. And gone are the days of you thinking, oh, well, as a Force, I'm not going to have threat. Yes, you are. As a force, in most average situations of similar gear, if you're playing decently well, you're probably gonna have threat. Now, how do we deal with that specific situation, or why does this matter, or anything along those lines? It's like, oh, well, everyone just does more damage and then they take threat away and I get my long range advantage. Yeah, here's the problem is that when that happens, you get a 15% damage buff, so then you take threat back again. How do we deal with that situation? Again, it's very build dependent. This is up to you personally, and I've had this tested with some of the people. Actually, my editor specifically is doing this build, and it actually worked very, very well for him. Forces can take sub ranger. Now, this doesn't guarantee long range advantage immediately for them. And if they don't have threat, or if they do have threat, is a massive damage loss. However, dazzle camo plus sub ranger, plus all these really, really strong 2-piece EX combinations actually overall ends up being a damage buff for force. So you can opt in party-based situations to run with a weapon that has dazzle camo on it, sub ranger, and still get access to your long range advantage and your massive amount of damage because of it. It actually ends up being a damage increase overall. Now, again, this is very build dependent. You absolutely do not have to go for this. However, after talking it over with, you guys have seen Mitch on the channel when we went over the force interview, if you do all of those things in a situation of, again, similar skill, I would say similar gear. I wouldn't even say similar skill. In similar gear situations, you're likely going to be in a situation where you will not take threat as a force, and you can actually get that extra damage bonus, and you will do massive amounts of damage. However, keep in mind, if you're playing with pugs, if you're playing with low gear players, people that are just using free gear, you likely will still have threat. Force does a massive amount of damage. Now, it's almost impossible to keep them off, especially since a lot of times Force just has uptime. And a lot of these fights that, I mean, realistically, we haven't gotten a really big boss fight in a while where everyone kind of gets uptime at the same time. It's very planned. It's very easy for everyone to maintain and push their damage out at that same time. A lot of the targets tend to move around a lot. Force has not only really good counterplay, it also has very good sustained damage, and it also has hit scan damage, which is you can just land your target. You can land your hit pretty much exactly where you want it to land on a weak spot. Not every class has that advantage. So just keep that in mind, especially in the new UQ. That's a really big one. The new UQ Force is kind of going to crush, especially with the situation with these targets or these bosses that like to basically charge you back and forth. Force can basically stand in one spot and do tons of damage that way. So that's another combination you want to consider. The one that my editor is using, I believe, is Maintain Balance, Shortage HP, and Dazzle Camouflage. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty over the top, and it actually is working very well for him. And he's doing massive amounts of damage, while the rest of us are holding threat away from him and also dealing damage and don't feel really irritated with bosses or other enemies running back and forth all over the place. We can kind of control them. He can get his damage in, and we can actually get our counters in. It's a very, very nice combination. But that's pretty much it. Hopefully that helps out. If you guys have any questions, feel free to toss in the comments below. If there's any EX combinations that I missed that you guys like I know, for example, someone's going to probably tell me about enemy felled PP gain and stuff like that. I'm aware of those combinations. They just weren't really important for this combination, whatever you guys want to call it. Anyway, let me know what your combinations are in the comments below. Like if you enjoyed the video, so if you want to keep up with more. As always, thanks to channel members. You guys are fantastic, and I appreciate every single one of you. And I will see you all next time. Take care, my friends. Peace out.